Hi, everybody. Welcome to our channel, our Scientology Stories Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I want to welcome you to our channel. And before I get started, I want to introduce my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. How you doing today, Janis?
Good, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. It's a nice Saturday morning here on the West Coast, and 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the East Coast and everything like that.
Good. And g'day to everyone watching. We're in for another good show today. I know you guys are liking our guests, and today we have Bitty Blythe Miscavige. She doesn't use Miscavige anymore, but that's of the past, and we will have some discussions about that. Anyway, welcome, Bitty, please.
Hi, Bitty. How you doing this morning?
Fine. How are you both?
We're doing good. We're doing good. Yeah. Before we get started, I wanted to say a couple of things. Number one is we're going to interview Bitty, and we've got some subjects we want to talk to her about. And then we're going to do a giveaway probably right before we do questions and answers. We're going to do a giveaway. And what we're giving away is one of our coffee mugs here from our merch store. It says Our Scientology Stories Peeling the Onion. And you can either have right Janis on the other side or correct Mark. And we'll do a giveaway on that in the chat. So stick around for that, okay? The other thing I wanted to mention is, yes, there's a cat. What's your cat's name, Bitty?
It's Aria.
Aria. Okay,
She's
so Aria is joining the show. One thing I wanted to mention was yesterday, September 15th, was my 33rd anniversary of finally leaving the Sea Organization. I left September 15th, 1990 from the Gold Base in Gillham Hot Springs. And I was staying out at we had apartments out by the Hemet Airport. Mm-hmm. And this is when Greg Wilhare and James Byrne were on mission. And if you were late for muster, you ended up in the RPF, 3 times or whatever the heck it was. Anyway, I missed the bus on purpose, and I ran across a field to a machine shop, and I called a taxi and went to the local Ramada Inn on Florida Avenue. And I called up the security booth and I said, you either give me my stuff or I'm going to the cops. And I'm going to show up there at noon with the police. And they were like, no, we don't want you to do that. I knew they would respond that way. Anyway, by the end of the day, I was gone. And that was the last time that I was in Scientology and in the Sea Organization. So 33 years ago yesterday.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
And then
Go ahead, Janis.
How many weeks after that did I phone your in-law?
About 4 weeks later. When I left, I went to San Diego, and I went to my ex-wife now, her family, because I had nowhere to go. And then I had some money, so I flew to Hawaii for 10 days and to destimulate. I ride back, the day I ride back from Hawaii at his house, her father's house, phone rings. I pick it up, and she goes, is this the Richard Catano whose daughter is Julie Catano? And I went, Janis. She goes, I'm looking for you. I said, oh, okay. And this was before cell phones or the internet. I mean, she literally had to look in the white pages to find Catano is not a normal name, and she was able to find him in the San Diego area. So that's how that happened.
Well, I'd been tipped off, I think, by Karen De La Carrier. She was still in good standing, but she and Jeannie Franks, or Jeannie Bogfart, had been in touch with me, even though I'd left and no one was supposed to talk to me. And they'd mentioned that you had left. And so that's when Paul and I, well, let's have him join us and we'll figure out what we'll do.
And that's exactly what we did. The next day, I drove up to see you up in Santa Paula. And then we got a hold of Terry and Fernando, who were in Florida. And we decided, let's go into business together. And we moved to Las Vegas, and the rest is history. Anyway, so that's that story. Let's get on with interviewing Bitty here. Bitty, Janis and Bitty, you guys said you wanted to talk a little bit more about your time on the Flagship Apollo in the Sea Organization in the Mediterranean back in the early 70s. So go ahead, Janis. What is it you guys want to talk about?
On the ship, besides having your regular job, like I was a messenger and Bitty was senior HCO8, there's another job that people hold, and that is watches. When the ship is in port or even at sea, we have what we call condition 1, 2, 3, and 4. Condition 1 is all hands. Condition 2 is half the crew. It's divided in half. One's on port watch, one's on starboard watch. condition 3, we didn't usually do much with condition 3, but condition 4 was where they did watches on the bridge when we were at sea. Anyway, so when we were at sea, Bitty and I both ended up being trained on it and doing the same job at different times, and that was lookout. And so that's what we were going to talk about, because that was fun, being at sea as a lookout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was great. I mean, on the watches, they had like a separate, like you would have your job. I was a senior HCO aide, and you would then also know we're going to sea today, and you have to be on watch at from X time to X time. So, and no one gave you any trouble on that. You automatically went and you did it, and you went. At least I didn't get any stopped on it at all. Anyway, and I did a lookout. There was a separate organization for the watches. It's like you had different leaders. Like mine was you had a con who was a conning officer that were in charge of the whole thing and the sailing of the ship and all that type of thing. And I was lookout. At the time I worked with various people. Rick Merwin was one of them, and this type of thing. I think my con was Diana Hubbard Horwich, and so she would work under LRH a lot at that time. She was just in training or something. Anyway, and so we would be on lookout. I liked lookout because you get to see everything. You learn about the sky and the waves and and it's stuff I've still even used to this day. I'll think about it, and use it. So that was the other job I had at that time. And now, even before that, though, before I was external HCO aide or senior HCO aide, I was in the engine room, and at that time, the jobs we had different watches. So I wasn't a lookout at that time. I was a different one. And I think that at that time, I would be on what was called at that time an INR, which was inspections and reports, but not the same as it was an INR. Right.
Yeah, not like the ethics officer in
No.
The later days.
We would check all the gauges and write down all the numbers and all this type of stuff. And so that was what I did at that time. So I did that for, when we were wherever we were at sea. And then later on, when I became an HCO aide, I then went on lookout.
Fabulous. So let me show a couple pictures here. This is the Apollo here, right, Janis?
Yes, that's the Apollo. That's a nice picture. Someone touched that up.
Bitty, when you came on, was it already the Apollo or was it still the Royal Scotsman?
It was the Apollo when I came on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then here's another shot of it here.
Yeah.
And then where would you guys go ahead?
Well, she's all dressed up with her flags. So that must have been a day that we were having open house or something like that. And all the locals would come aboard and get a tour of the ship.
Right.
Okay. And then can you tell me where would you guys do you're doing lookout? Is it up there on the top of the bridge up there, or what part of the ship was it at?
See the top windows? There's 5 windows at the top there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right above that. Those top windows are the bridge, and that's where the helmsman is and the radar. And right above there is the flying bridge. And there was a rail around there, and then there was the compass, and the lookout was out to go, 360 around to look for things, and then had the compass so that they could spot where the item is and read that marking out down to the quartermaster below. And there was, I think in another picture that you'll see the speaker system to the bridge below.
Oh.
There.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's me when I was doing lookout stuff, and that's looking into the compass. But you can't see it. But there is a mouthpiece with a hose that goes down the bridge, and you blow on it to make a sound, and then someone listens at the other end. No electricity or anything like that. It's just all through a big hole or a pipe.
Right. It's like tin cans.
Doing the tin cans on a string.
Anyway, but it was. I can't hear you, Mark. You're on mute.
My dog was barking. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I said, what type of things, Bitty, would you have to say down that to the bridge?
Well,
If you
so
were on
like I
lookout?
said, there was a lot of organization to the whole thing. So on lookout, at least when I was on it, we reported to the QM, which was the quartermaster, who then reported to the con. So it was like there was a hierarchy and an org chart of sorts that existed. So we would have to report to that person every single time. You know what I mean? You would see something and you would do it through that tin can. And what you're looking into is like a compass. It's a gyro that would move around with the ship and all that other stuff. And you'd have to, you know, the other thing is you would learn on a ship, there's points off the bow. So you would say something is 2 points off the starboard bow or 3. And that was how you would tell people where things were at. Otherwise, it's like a big ocean out there. How do you tell them where things were at or that type of thing, or off the port, you know, so you would learn this structure of things. Anyway, it was kind of interesting at the time, you know what I mean? And we were pretty young. And I remember at one point, and then Janis, you may remember this too, I had to be tied in. So in other words, what that meant was you're on the deck, you're up there high, you know, it's not like the crow's nest or something like that, which I've been to, but you're on this deck. And if the waves were really big or the winds or it was real strong, they would tie you off. So in other words, you would have a rope around your waist and it would be tied to the railings so that you would never go overboard. And I remember having that a couple of times, actually.
Well, were you with us, Bitty, when we were in that storm out of the Azores?
I don't remember exactly where it was, but I remember I definitely had a storm and it was a big deal and being tied in.
Was it scary when that happened?
Oh,
I mean, like,
yeah, you see the ship go all sorts of different ways. I mean, you didn't think a structure could go that way. You know what I mean? So,
well, we were diving into the waves and then coming back up and pitching as well. And I remember having message runs to the bridge where I'm holding onto the rail and walking myself by my hands up to the bridge, because if I let go and I look down, I'm looking straight down at water. We were pitching that, you know, it was like so much rolling that it was like, you're like, whoa, and you just holding on for your life to get to the bridge.
Yeah.
And
I watched
Ray Thacker was the lookout, and she was there tied to the rail because she would have gone over otherwise.
Yeah.
I watched Deadliest Catch for years on the Discovery Channel, where they're catching crabs in the Bering Sea, and those boats are going and waves are coming over, and I'm thinking, gosh, it looks so dangerous. How could you ever deal with that? And I imagine it must have been just as scary, like you, Janis, like you said, you're holding onto a rope when the boat's going like this. You know?
Oh yeah. Well, Neville was telling the story on the Avon where they strung a rope from the bow to the bridge, and everyone would hook themselves on to get across the deck, because the storm they went through in the Bay of Biscay was just, they were bobbing around like a cork.
And there's, from what I understand, and I don't know about this, but when we first joined, we had to do what was called the AB course, which was the able-bodied seaman. So you had to learn to tie certain knots and certain, you know, you learn the clouds and blah, this type of thing, half of which I don't remember. But, and you became actually certified in Panama. At least I was, as an able-bodied seaman or something like that. Anyway, and then, you know, and that's the beginning training. So I remember on lookout, I had to have that as a prerequisite to learning additional things. You know what I mean? The only other thing aside from being tied down that I remember of significance was, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong too, Janis, because I don't know this, but the organization on going out to sea was old school. Even at that point, it was like the lookouts don't exist anymore. Nowadays, they do things all by equipment, and they have radars, and they have, you know, and there's maybe 10 people on the bridge. We had like 30, 20, you know what I mean? And so we did we were very old school in how it was done. So I'm just, that said, anyway, I remember one time, and Diana was con. I remember this, and we and I was a lookout, and I was reporting the shadows I was seeing in the water. You know what I mean? Because you would have to report that because it means different depths. you know what I mean? Or clouds, and there was no clouds in the sky, and I was seeing shadows, so that meant rocks. And I remember reporting, and I remember LRH coming out at that time and saying, you know, freeze, sort of stopping it, and we backed out the same way on our wake, the way we came in, so that we wouldn't hit anything. But we were in a field of rocks at that time, and this was, I think, in the Caribbean.
You know, Janis's book, I read Janis's books. If you read those books, you go, it's a wonder nobody got killed.
I know. It's amazing that we actually did all that stuff. And you know, you could say, okay, old school, that was good, but there was a lot of room for, you know, hey, I think you should do this, or I think you should do that. And, you know, conflicting ideas on how to do it and blah, blah, blah. So, but it was amazing we didn't all die.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think it was good we were old school, because sailing from Madeira to Agadir, where we normally would go, those cruise liners would just set it on their gyro and off they go with one person on the bridge. And we'd be merrily sailing along, you know, this little boat in comparison to those cruise liners. And we'd have to get out of their way because no one was on their bridge to even notice that we were there.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we're like trying to dodge these big cruise liners coming through.
Yeah.
And I read in Mike Rinder's book too about how down in the holds you had the Flag Bureau management, and all of the desks and the filing cabinets were roped and tied, because when there was a big storm, all the furniture and everything would shift from side to side.
That's right.
Yeah. And in the dining rooms, they had ledges to put up so that the dishes wouldn't fly off the tables. And Mary Sue's dog, Vixie, I remember in one of the storms, Vixie sliding back and forth across the floor until Mary Sue grabbed her and threw her on a couch. And in one of the storms, everything's supposed to be tied to the deck. Someone tied some chairs to a table. And I'm sitting outside the A-deck lounge where LRH and Mary Sue were having dinner. And Jill Gleason was the Commodore Steward at the time, and she was sitting on the other side of the door from me. And we took a roll that suddenly Jill and the table in the other chair all come sliding in right next to me.
Oh my God. I remember walking, speaking of the, you know, the Flag Bureau, or whatever it was called at that time there. And the bulkheads, the walls of the ship would be so hot because the engines would be right on the other side.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And it would be so hot, you know, it was already hot, you know, we were where we were, you know what I mean? So you would have that heat radiating through the steel walls. And sometimes whenever the ship moved or that type of thing, you'd be thrown against the bulkhead, and it would be like, you'd get burnt, and then you'd have to, you know, and that would happen on and off. So you would learn to, you know, sort of when to walk, and you would quickly run to something, hold on to it, and then run to something else. And you learned these things as you were surviving on that thing, that ship.
That's great. I'm going to show another photo here. This is the engine room crew, and Bitty, you worked in the engine room, right?
Exactly. And I know those people, and so does Janis. You know, there's Whack, there's John Alcock, there's Peter, and then the guy all the way over on the right of the picture. I don't know on whose side, but with the curly hair. Right. That's my brother Johnny.
Yeah. The tall with the curly hair. That's your brother. Yeah.
The Snipes, which is the engineers, they all got 50cc motorbikes, so those were easy just to wheel up the gangway and wheel back down. And it became a popular thing. The different auditors all got bikes, and getting motorbikes and going off around the different islands or the ports and stuff became a thing. And the Snipes actually used to teach the young messengers and Bitty, us young girls, how to ride the motorbikes.
That's right. And then one other thing, what they had was a motorbike that was generally, I know that what my brother had was a Montesa, and it was a Spanish bike. And my brother went on to race professionally. So he learned motocross, which is a whole ordeal, and enduro. And he raced with the American team in the Olympics and wrote a book on the subject.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And anyway, so his son, which is Ian, who looks just like him, also rode enduro. And it's like, you got to be able to, on enduro, you're not only racing through, you know, rough terrain and all that, you got to know how to basically strip down and rebuild your motor right then and there, which my brother could do because of his experience. So he learned all that there and then was able to use it later.
How long was he in the Sea organization, and is he still around today?
Yes, he is still around. He's in Colorado. He built his house and all that, and he lives there, and talk to him frequently. And I don't know, gosh,
That's okay.
years, but maybe 5 years,
Okay.
5, 6, 8. He learned, and his love of bikes came from there. He would drive through Spain and Portugal and all that area.
That's great.
He's on the ship. His job was donkey man in the engine room, so his nickname was Donkey.
Yeah.
Everyone just called him Donkey.
He was a fuel technician, so he would know how the pistons worked and all that other stuff, and would be able. And so this was useful because then later he was able to rebuild his motorcycles and all that type of stuff.
Weren't the engineers, the snipes, as you called them, weren't they like kind of their own like little hierarchy or whatever on the ship? In other words, didn't they have their own dining and berthing and all that stuff?
They did have their own dining. I remember because I ate like an American, and I was and I had foreign, people from England and all this, and they would eat on the other side. So I was always having to switch, and I had to learn to eat the other way. And I remember much later being pointed out to me, hey, you eat kind of strange for an American. And but I remember that I had to learn that because we were very close in the engine room dining area. Yeah, but they did.
Yeah. They did have their own, and they had their own quarters below the bridge. The officers' quarters were behind the bridge, and below the bridge, below the officers' quarters was the snipes berthing, and they had their own bathroom there, and they installed their own washing machine. And they didn't need a dryer because you just hung it in the boiler room, and all your clothes got dry real fast.
Exactly. You could just put it on after the rinse.
Bitty, what were your favorite ports that you remember going to, either in the Mediterranean or the Caribbean? Do you remember where you guys liked going to?
I personally loved Portugal, and I loved Porto, and I liked Setúbal and going on the catamarans, and those are what I have the fondest memories of. Matter of fact, when I built my house, which is, I'll show you photos of it, but I designed it, and it was designed after Spanish-looking Morocco at that time. So it was and a lot of people go, oh, it looks like a Spanish house, but it doesn't. It's actually Moroccan. So it's interesting.
Well, there's a lot of Moroccan influence in Spain and vice versa.
Exactly. Very much so.
Fabulous. Anyway, I was going to move on to, I want to talk about the Freewinds, but before we do that, I want to talk about, Bitty, you and your husband at the time, Ronnie, you guys left the Sea Org and then came back, like you said, for the Freewinds. Can you explain or tell the story about why you all left and how you got brought back into the Sea Org? How did that all happen, and when was that?
Okay, good. And so it was after there was a whole time period that we refer to by time as the mission holder conference time. Anyway, it was after that my husband at the time, Ronnie, and he probably has the dates and all this stuff way better than I do. But anyway, we realized at that time there was an attempted takeover of CMO, and we were in CMOCW, and this was I think Gail or Dee Dee and all these guys were on lines, and we said, hey, they're about to Ronnie flew out there actually without anyone warning and just drove there, which at the time was a big deal. You know what I mean? Because, no one was supposed to do that, but he did it and told them all. And I may have my times mixed up, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a text here from Ronnie. It was 1982. And when you get into the group, that was called the International Tanning and Fencing Team.
Okay. I knew what it was. That's right. Anyway.
The viewers don't know what that is yet, but go ahead.
And I'll tell them what it was. But anyway, so he went up and he said there was this whole takeover plan, blah, blah, blah. And that was a big flap because who took over at that time was Dave Miscavige and a guy named John Nelson and all this other stuff. And so we were sort of telling on them, and then the takeover occurred. So it was like, we were like too little too late to the game. Like it had already happened by the time we discovered it or were able to find out it was happening. And anyway, and then
and the takeover was getting rid of Dee Dee and Gail Irwin, right? And right, Janis, is that around the same time?
Yeah, they'd already gotten rid of Dee Dee, and now 3 months later, the end's now going after Gail.
Right.
Go ahead, Bitty.
Anyway, and that's what it was. And we were like down on the totem pole at that time, and we were in CMOCW, but we had enough intelligence information to be able to figure this out, to know that this was happening. And I was in charge of investigations at that time, because there was a part of the CMO that was the Commodore's Messenger Org that I was then in at that point, and part of it was investigations. Dave DM was in action at INT, so it was always a rivalry between investigations unit, which was called IU, and then action. Anyway, so we were able to find, through investigation, find out that this was going to occur, but it was too little, too late. So we were targeted at that point. We had to, we were being ComEv'd and all this other stuff. I think ComEv'd is a justice procedure. That's the highest one you could get. I think we were. But anyway, but at that time, true to form, which I'm sure you've all heard about, was the separation of, if you were married or together at all, the first thing was separate you. So they left me in Clearwater and brought Ronnie to INT, back, to INT. And that's when he joined the team of, there was a bunch of people on the deck. So that means they were busted from their jobs for various reasons. And one was Paul Grady. And then I forget who all else was on it.
It was just the three of them. It was Mark Yeager, Paul Grady, and Ronnie. And the three of them were assigned to building fences together around the reservoirs so that no one could poison the water.
Right. Exactly. And they were what were they called? What did they call themselves? They were, go ahead.
The International Tanning and Fencing Team, or International Fencing and Tanning Team.
Because they were shirtless, I'm sure, and they were getting a tan, right?
Yeah, they were. And that's how they liked it. And they were very upbeat about the whole thing. You couldn't get those guys down when they were together. So it was good. And for them, I mean, it wasn't good. They were getting, at that time, they were going through horrendous amounts of injustice and all that. But they always tried to look at stuff on the bright side, and, they were the international.
They had fun together.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, then, so they decided, I don't know who it was or how it was done, but it was decided at that time, well, Ronnie and I were troublesome sources. We're like, we needed to be under control. So we need to go to the RPF, which is the lowest, thing that you could go to or whatever. And we had been before. And we went, no, we're not going. And we've seen it. We went, so he came back to Clearwater. He flew back or got back, and we were together. And we left at that point. We said, we're not going. We'll leave and they said, well, your only choice is to leave. And we said, well, we'll leave then, because we're not going. We're not going to the RPF. So we left, and we took Justin at the time, because at the time, anyway, it was a long story, but I remember I was talking about this to Justin, and he goes, well, why didn't you take Sterling at that time? And at that time I couldn't, you know what I mean? It's like, even though they were separated, they grew up together in the same nursery, really. And they were together most of the time, except for at that time, I couldn't take it because of the way the legal documents were worked out when I was divorced. I couldn't just take them. And that he'd be on the backs of a box of milk or something like that if I did. Anyway, so so we left at that point. We went to work. We went to Pennsylvania. He worked building fences. A guy named Ted Winiger. That's what was it. Yeah, he had learned this technology of how to do that. So anyway, he did that for a little while, and then we quickly got out of that, and we went to New Hampshire. And we worked with in David Gale's company, and his daughter Elizabeth Gale, I know, has a show and all that type of thing, I guess. And we worked with him at that company. It was a Real World or something. And then it was then run by Larry Burns. Anyway, long story, but we did well there. He was in charge of all the sales and all that type of thing of the software, and I was more internal, more HR. Yeah. Right.
Now they didn't declare you, so that allowed you to work for other Scientologists.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. We did not get declared at that time. As a matter of fact, this was during the time when I remember Dave and Marty Rathbun used to come to DC a lot. They were some guy, I forget what it was. And again, I wasn't on that side of things, but they would come and they would come stay with us in New Hampshire a lot during that time. So we weren't declared. We were sort of in good standing. I remember we had to do some token rigmarole to get back in good standing, but we were anyway. And then we worked in this organization. We did very well. We had a big house and all that other stuff. And then we were only out a few years. And then Ronnie went to the Flagship org, which was in Clearwater at that time, and it was being run at that time by Ron Norton, and he got with him and was, decided to come back into the SO, came back to where we were living and said, hey, I'm going to go back in and da-da-da-da. And I said, well, okay, I'll go with you. So we left at that time. We had Justin, and Jenna was probably 2.5, 3 years old at that time. And when Ronnie went back, he went with to Incom, which was with Foster.
The computers. Computers. Yeah. Incom was computers.
Yeah, exactly. And I went to, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to ask you, because I know it's a big decision. Do you remember what your consideration was on, we should go back, or we're going to go back? Like what sort of tipped the scales in that direction?
Well, at the time, it should be noted, we were not anti-Scientology or anything like that at that time. We were like, hey, you guys are crazy. We don't want anything to do with the organization of it, blah, blah, blah. And we had that very separated in our minds at that time, right or wrong.
So Dave wasn't involved in getting Ronnie back in?
No.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I didn't think that he wanted him, but he wanted a place that they could go to and, run race cars and stuff like that.
Just so the viewers know, Ronnie, who Bitty was married to, is the older brother of David Miscavige. Right. Just so people understand that.
Right. Yeah. So no, it wasn't that. It was he was actually gotten in by Ron Norton, and who got him in, who was the captain of the FSO, and said you guys really should go back and all that. But to answer your question, Mark, at first, no, I didn't want to at that time. But, we sort of, I remember at that time thinking, and this is a, 20-year-old or whatever, 29-year-old person, 30-year-old thinking. So it wasn't, and I was thought, if this is all there is, if, I have this house, I have this blah, 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 I have this, and then I don't want to, I'm kind of done with it. So I want an adventure, and that was what probably sold me more than anything to go back, was that adventure, and and I always knew, and so did Ronnie, I think in the back of our minds, that we could always make it on our own if we had to, and if so we didn't. It put us in a different state of mind when we went back. Well, when we left, we said, we're not doing what you're saying. And when we went back in, we kind of would only do it on our terms, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I know we were, we would listen and all that stuff, but that was our sort of mind at that time.
Okay. So then go ahead. So when you went back to Clearwater then, right?
No, we went back to LA. And
you went to LA?
Yeah, because we did a big, huge cross-country trip. And again, I've been across country a couple of times now. And stopped in Colorado and saw my family and all this type of stuff. Anyway, then we went to LA. And Ronnie, I think Incom was located in LA at that time.
It was. It was in it was in the Big Blue, Cedars complex downstairs.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and Ronnie went there to work with Foster, et cetera. And I had been, while I was in New Hampshire or what have you, I was called by Mark Yeager, and he might have been CMO at that time. And he called and he wanted me to go on a project to set up the Freewinds. I mean, from beginning to end, the
Freewinds. That's the Freewinds.
Right. And where was it going to go? And I think at that time, Paul was purchasing it or looking for a ship to purchase. I don't know why exactly they were purchasing a ship. Other than, you know, because you hear about OT8 and that was why. And then I know the IAS was on board. So I don't really know why it was being purchased, you know, other than what I was told, the story at that time, which was, yeah, we're getting back into the Sea Org, you know what I mean? And so, and the first thing we got to do is buy a ship to do that. So, and I was put on so when I arrived back to LA, the first thing I did was work out, was to go and where are we going to bring the ship? Where do we go? Do we go back to the Mediterranean? Do we go to the Caribbean? Where do we go? Because the Apollo had been kicked out of every place. So, yeah.
Do you mind if I have Janis interject as to why we got the ship and all that, Janis? We wanted to talk a little bit about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you definitely went over, sorry, go ahead. I mean, didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, Janis.
Yeah, well, a lot of what I think, this is some speculation in it because I couldn't get straight answers when it was happening as to why we buying a ship. And it ends up with, well, we needed a place offshore for the International Association of Scientologists. So the IRS could not get to the money that would be gotten through donations. And I'm like, why are we even doing donations? LRH says don't. But this is a whole thing apparently that the attorneys had recommended be done. And yes, Mark.
Well, I was in the meeting where that idea of the international associations actually came up. I was in author services in LA. I was working for David Miscavige at the time. I can visualize it. You know, as we're sitting here right now in the conference room, an attorney named Chris Cobb, who was one of Scientology's attorneys, recommended to David Miscavige, Norman, Vicky Asnaran, everybody, you know, hey, you know, we set up this, you guys set up this Safe Environment Fund. Do you remember that? It was a fund for Mary Sue's defense and the people in Snow White's defense. The Safe Environment Fund, which was basically to pay for legal fees for them, right? And we never had a request for a refund or anything like that. And he goes, you know, we could set up something like that too. And that's where the idea of the International Association of Scientologists came from, where they could park money offshore and it would be out of the hands of the IRS and the government. And that's where the whole idea of the IAS came from. As far as donations go, it was an attorney that suggested it, and that's how they ran with it.
Right. And then because OT8 was supposed to go to the Flag Service Org in Clearwater to deliver to their public, but they needed a front as to why the Freewinds was being purchased and the IAS being located on there. So that's when it was decided to set up a ship service org on the ship to deliver OT8, taking OT8 away from the Flag Service Org, which created a major thing because Paul was on mission at the Flag Service Org and this came up. And
Debbie Cook was really upset.
Yeah, and he reported that David Miscavige was basically the who of the crash in the Flag Service Org stats because he took OT8 away from him and gave it to the Freewinds. So, and that ended up with Paul getting in trouble, and that's a whole nother story. But my whole speculation on this, based off the bits that I did get, is the ship was gotten for the International Association of Scientologists, keep the money offshore, and then a front was to deliver OT8 on the ship.
Yeah, and that would make sense because of what I later then learned. And at the time, I was tunnel vision. I didn't really, it didn't matter to me. I just wanted to set up the ship, okay. And but it would make sense because the level of OT8 was just so minuscule. I remember my
took like a week.
A week, like not even like a couple hours if you were quick. You know what I mean? I'm like, we set up a whole ship for this. You know what I mean? And it was like very short, very, you know. So I do tend to agree with you, Janis. That's
when they came up with OT tape lecture courses. Remember that?
Yeah, right.
That was the other services they delivered.
But they had to come up with OTA in order to fill the ship and come up with something. So that's when Ray Midoff was put under pressure to go through all the LRH notes and things and try and put OT8 together. Yeah. LRH had never put it together himself. That was Ray Midoff going through notes and going, oh, I think this goes here and this goes here. And okay, this should work. And when it was being released, I remember Ray was kind of sweating, kind of, oh, I hope this all works out okay.
Anyway, yeah.
Back to your story, Bitty. Now you're setting up the ship. Go ahead.
All right. So I had to figure out Mediterranean or Caribbean. And I don't know if anyone remembers this, but at the time, the Mediterranean was pretty rough. They had just thrown this Jewish guy off the ship in a wheelchair. You know, it was like a lot of cultural upset and this type of thing. So I sort of went pretty quickly, you know, no, I'm not going to go to the Mediterranean. I'm going to focus on the Caribbean. Also, the ship would be closer and this type of thing. And at this time, I think we were about to finalize. We were looking at the La Boheme, which is what it was called after the yeah. And
this was the La Boheme before the Freewinds, yeah.
I'll tell you about how I named it too.
Okay, go ahead.
But anyway, because I'm looking at that name and how we did that. But anyway, so at that time, so then I went to every Caribbean port. I said, okay, I'm going to be a freelance author. I'm going to go there undercover, so to speak, where I'm going to be like a freelance author. I even had cards made up, and I was under an action mission under Paul. And I had cards made up and stuff that I was a freelance author. And I went to all these Caribbean islands, Trinidad, Jamaica, all of them, and I went to their newspapers and to their morgue files to find out, A, do they still have all the history on the Apollo? And two, what did they think of religion at this time? You know, I mean, what was their thoughts? Like if you were a newer religion, would it be a problem or something like that? And I wasn't at this point at all saying I was in Scientology. So I went around at that time. And I remember Paul sent someone then shortly after I had already left on the mission to come with me and be a bit of a bodyguard because he was worried. This was after I had gone to Trinidad, and Trinidad, it was sort of rough. You know what I mean? They were like, at the time, again, the blonde hair, and they were like, you know, it was like unusual at that time. And I was on my own. I didn't have, you know, so he sent someone with me. I remember that. Anyway, so I went to all these islands and was researching all this. Not me, I don't have a dog. I was researching all the islands and their morgue files and meeting with their Department of Tourism. In some cases, I met with their prime ministers and all this other stuff to find out. Basically, I wanted to know, how do we enter the Caribbean and not be attacked? You know what I mean? Like the Apollo was. The Apollo was under heavy attack for drug use and all this other stuff that it was being accused of and stuff. And how did I disassociate that at that? That was my whole plan, and make this a safe ports for us. Yes.
Now you say that the Apollo was basically being accused of drug use. Now that was just someone starting rumors, or was there actual evidence? I mean, I was there and I know of no drug use on the—
I know of none either. I think it was at the time, and this is the story I got, was that it was you know, completely manufactured by disaffecteds, this type of thing, and it was not true. And I know it to not be true as well.
Right.
But that's what it was said. It was like a lot of things were said about it. I know that even on the Apollo, when we were there was a lot of effort done by LRH to try and make it so that we were accepted, like the troubadours or whatever they are, the singing
All stars. Yeah.
And there was a lot of stuff. I told you I was tunnel vision, so I didn't have, you know, no relations with them. So you know, there was a lot of effort at that. So this is now years and years, decades later, and I'm trying to figure out what happened and what do I have to make sure I don't step in, so to speak, with this new ship. And so I went all around and I did learn some interesting things. I learned there was a group of Mormon missionaries in one of the islands, and I think it might have been St. Lucia or something like that, and not well received at all. And I used it as an example. I would say, hey, well, you're not accepting of the Mormons. And I didn't realize at the time the reason they weren't accepting of the Mormons at that time is because they were considered to be racist. And at that time, the Caribbean islands were 100% black or 90% black. And so, it was, you know, not so I wanted to make sure I don't want to associate with them, you know what I mean? But, so had to work out. So I gathered all this information. And again, I met with departments of tourism. I met with many of the head newspapers at the time that carried these stories. And a lot of times I found the morgue files didn't exist after 2 years, or a morgue file is a file in the newspapers that have back history. At that time, they were hard copy, you know what I mean? So they weren't on computers. And I think some of them may have had fiche type operations, but not really,
we're back in the ancient days, with typewriters.
Yeah, exactly. So they didn't have it. And so I wanted to see what, would they, if they were to write a report on the Freewinds, would they turn around to their files and pull all this, bad information or old information and associate it with us? So anyway, I came back, and then with all that data collected, I had to come up with the strategy for the Freewinds. And by strategy, what was the plan? Like, how do we enter this port after being kicked out, many, many, many years ago? How do we enter it safely? And so it was at that time I decided, or what was part of the strategy was to renovate the ship, which we had to. At this time now we had the La Boheme, and it needed full top to bottom renovation. And I was operating as a special project at this point. And I was located in LA and I was located in a place that we always called Doggy Heaven. Terrible name. I apologize for it ahead of time, but it was called Doggy Heaven because it was the old, Cedars used to be, the whole blue building used to be a hospital. So this was a morgue where they would take animals that had already died and would, burn them or whatever, you know. And so they had little ovens, and so that's where I would work.
Yeah, cremation. Yeah,
cremation.
Animals. Yeah.
Anyway, so we called it Doggy Heaven for that. That was a nickname that we gave to it. And so we worked in there for a long time. This is where I put together the plans and stuff like that, and executed the whole strategy on it. But anyway, at that time it was to get, basically my whole plan was to make it so that the Caribbean loved us no matter what. No matter what we did, we funneled all our money of the renovations, of which was 11 million, through the port. And we selected a port, which was Curacao, because of its ability to have dry dock facilities. And we could do it. We would always have it. We would always be safe in that port. Even if we lost everything in the world, we would be safe in that port. So we funneled everything through it. And we worked with locals and all this other stuff. And we were like, you're not going to shoot your own arm. So that was the strategy, was that to endear us and get us so close. Yes.
Well, also in Curacao, didn't you set up the daycare there in a rented home that was owned by the Prime Minister?
Well, I don't know if it was owned by the Prime Minister. They had interesting architecture there, but yeah, it was a very nice house. And that was because at that time we needed a captain of a ship. So I didn't do this. I think it was another mission or something that did that. They got Napier.
Mike Napier.
Mike.
Yeah, and he was the captain, and he had his wife, and they had several children, and so they lived on shore. And Kathy D. Simone was there as well, and she also had a lot of kids. So that we set up a house. Yeah.
Kathy D. Simone is also known as Kathy Frazier, who is the lady who, in some of the videos, comes out at the Gold Base and talks to or yells at people coming to ask questions like Bob Ferris, where is he?
Right.
So that's the same Kathy.
Exactly. And DeSimone was the deputy. Bob DeSimone was the deputy captain. So if we ever lost for whatever reason, Mike Napier, we would always have a second captain. And that was Bob DeSimone. Yes, go ahead.
I was going to ask, I know you're going through your strategy, but do you remember the first time you ever stepped on the La Boheme, or did you ever go there before it was?
I
What was
went
it like?
35 times to the Caribbean during that time. 35 separate trips, stamps in my passport. And I remember going on when it was, the La Boheme before the renovations and everything, right when we had first gotten it sort of and got it moved, and moved it to the Caribbean. And
Right.
it was interesting. It was all done for the opera, so it was all
Yeah.
based on that and pictures of that and things like that around for. And so we, so we brought a design team there to redesign it at that time.
Okay. Carry on. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Anyway, it was at that, so we came up with this whole strategy on how to safe point and safeguard that ship. And that was probably the number one thing I worked on at that time. And then also, as the project grew, I began taking on more things like the renovation, the recruitment, the financing of it. Even the donations came out of IAS and then went to us on the ship project, and everything was then put under me being run out of doggy heaven in the pack area. And my sister Sarah was in charge of the renovations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so she is the one that brought it in, and what we learned at that time was that we didn't know anything. That was our big, realization. Like, don't kid yourself. You don't know the first thing about what to do, and that was what we realized. And that we, so then we said, okay, well, if you don't know what to do, what do? You get people who do. And so that was how we found that out, and we worked with people, and we had to keep costs down. So we thought, well, what better way than getting people to give their time or to help work with us? We'd feed them and birth them, but if they're trained, we'll use their skills and all that. And we had an incredible amount of people who came. And anyway, long stories, but we had to set it up in, we had to, if you're renovating an entire ship, an entire organization on an island that makes nothing, you know what I mean? Because the only thing Curacao did was oil, and from Argentina, right? So it didn't have its own, so we had to bring
factories and supply things.
Exactly.
Everything has to come in by ship. Everything has to come in by ship. Yeah.
Exactly. So we had a logistics office set up in LA and then also Miami that would load up containers and get containers and then ship them off to.
Wow.
I know, it was an incredible ordeal, incredible organization.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
To get it done and to run it. And we had to collect all this, every time we had to fund ourselves. So we were completely self-sufficient, you know what I mean? So anyway, she ran all of that from beginning to end, including getting it designed and all that. And she went on to renovate a lot of other stuff as well. But that was probably the first one that she learned on. And she was a licensed contractor in this in California, and so she had that as well. So
how do you want to mention the story then of how you came up with the name, the Freewinds?
Okay. Yes. Sorry. Good question. So I had to name it. We weren't going to call it the La Boheme. So, and
although Scientology always keeps the old names, Del Sol,
exactly.
The G's,
Well, it's kind of interesting how we came up. So freedom and is a number one surveyed popular thing for everyone. Not just, just anyone. You survey anyone, what's the one thing you want out of life is freedom. And happiness is pretty high up there too, but freedom was really high. And so one day we were sitting I remember, I think I was with Sarah, whatever. We were just sitting in our offices and stuff like that. And there was another girl there, Diane, forget her last name, but she was there too. And we were trying to think of what to call it. And we thought of trade winds because, you have the trade winds in the Caribbean that are constant. And so we went, okay, we'll put freedom in front of it. So we said free winds, and that was how we came up with it. And we were shocked that no one else had done it. Because when you name something like this, you have to then check the patents and the offices and make sure to see if anyone else has come up with this name. And no one had gotten that name. And I was stunned that no one had thought to use the words freedom and winds, trade winds together and come up with free winds. And so that was how we did it, and we got it cleared. And then we used, you might see it on the stack on the ship there. There's a crown. And
Yeah, I
that's
see it.
because the cruise line that owned the Freewinds is called Majestic Cruise Lines. And
that's a Scientology company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, but you came up with that name again too, Majestic.
Exactly, because Majestic was also a high name, and so we went, okay, fine. It's in, it's in, where we have it all insured in England and all this other stuff. So we'll call it Majestic Cruise Lines. Yeah, and that owns the Freewinds. And then the winds on the bottom, the logo for it was Mike Mnuchin, I think his name is.
Yeah,
he did that. Yeah, he just came up with that. We said we wanted winds to show it, you know what I mean? And he came up with that. And I don't know where he is now or anything like that, but he did that, and that was his contribution. There's so many people that contributed to this ship. It was a fun thing to do in that regard. You know what I mean? And it was.
And then, go ahead.
I was going to say,
who's this?
Janis. It was everything about it. We had to learn everything, like how to run a hotel, how to, what to put on the pillows, what amenities to have, how to, the stuff that, the shampoo bottles, the bookstores, we had to do everything. And how full did you have to be to hit your make break point, and in terms of finances. And we had to learn everything and do everything from the beginning. And how do you, run these relay offices that were set up for it, and all that type of stuff. I
put this up because I was going to find out. Sorry, not that. So then Janis, you then came to get what did you do to get them ready for the maiden voyage?
Yeah, it was the maiden voyage was like 2 months out, and the ship wasn't quite ready. So Bitty with Paul were like, we need to get a mission out there, but they needed someone who had sea experience and management administrative experience. And they looked and they're like, we haven't been at sea for so long. They didn't have someone that knew both until they go, hey, Janis knows both. And I was the chief officer of the CMO, Commodore's Messenger Org. And I was the
Janis knows boats. Janis knows boats. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I was also the deputy watchdog committee chairman at the time, and I was running several different sectors. Mm-hmm. But they managed to get me replaced on all that, and I went out as the mission in charge, and Jenny Linson was my mission second. Right. And I'll tell you, through that whole mission, the crew was so wonderful. Never once did I raise my voice for anything. Even the captain would say to me, oh, how'd you sleep? I said, oh, the bed was a little tough, stiff, or whatever you call mattresses. Next thing you know, I go to my cabin and they're moving the mattress out and moving another one in just because I made a comment that the bed was too stiff. But that's how that crew worked. I mean, they were incredible. I'd never worked with a crew that was so on it and so easy to deal with. And then I had several missionaries under me because Bitty, you sent out another team to do the OT8 release and another team to get me personnel that we needed. There must have been about 12 missionaries totally under my mission and to pull off the maiden voyage, of which we did an incredible job. And
we had to renovate one of the dining rooms in the middle of the maiden voyage. It was because it wasn't working right, and it was incredible. I remember, it was a lot of work. I think that was the longest I stayed up. I think I might have stayed up 5 days. I passed out, I remember, in one of the ports because I was just up. It was just physically too hard at that time.
That's amazing.
But the crew
it was quite an accomplishment. I mean, whether or not you agree with Scientology or anybody watching or anything like that, I mean, these were people who basically had never been on it, owned a ship before or renovated it, who did it from scratch and put a whole crew together and all that. And so it was quite an accomplishment, Bitty, that you carried out there.
Yeah, it was. And it was fun. It was like everything was new. Talk about an adventure. Everything was new. What menus should we have? So approving the menus. What type of coffee service should we have? What type of, everything about it was new. But Janis, I totally agree. The crew were phenomenal. They really
Oh
were
yeah,
incredible people.
yeah,
And talk about everything. It reminds me of not to compare it, obviously, but when everything goes right at the right time, like the beginning of the U.S. and the people who signed the Declaration of Independence, obviously not to make that comparison, but
Right.
things just go right, and that was one of those ones. So
yeah,
we had a good strategy, a good plan, and it went ahead.
yeah.
Unfortunately,
Everything just fell in.
right. I was going to say,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in our minds, it was all based for this little course that was called OT8 at that time, which was a course, I think. And it was nothing. It was just like nothing, and we're like, all that for this anyway. So.
Oh, you're right. Absolutely right. Listen, we're going to leave this story here so we can get to questions. We've been going for an hour here now.
Okay.
It went by fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did.
Anyway, I want to say to all of our viewers here, you can get in the chat and ask questions of Bitty and Janis and I. All you have to just write the word question so we can spot it and star it, and we will ask the questions. And but before we do that, we're going to do a giveaway of our Scientology Stories Peeling the Onion coffee mug. Right, Janis, or correct, Mark? Okay. And so we're going to do that in the chat here in just a minute. So go ahead and get in the chat and just say me, coffee mug me, or whatever you want to say in the chat. And then we're randomly, Bitty's going to do a countdown, and then we're randomly going to click on somebody, and you guys will win the coffee mug from our merchandise shop, which we've launched. I wanted to mention before we do that, while everybody's getting in the chat, okay, is that right now we hit 8,000 subscribers. We're actually at 8,300 subscribers now. Anyway, we're offering a 20% discount on certain items in our merchandise shop, which is the coffee mug I showed you, and also the t-shirt you see there with the G'day Mates on it, and our koala in a Hawaiian shirt. Okay. Anyway, both of those you can get for 20% discount right now in our merchandise shop. You just click on the store. Also underneath the comments section on your screen, you'll see these items there. You just click on them, and at checkout, the code is Team Onion, all one word, Team Onion, and you automatically will get a 20% discount. And that's going to end September 23rd, next Saturday. So anyway, so that 20% discount is good. If you'd like to get a coffee mug, if you'd like to get a t-shirt and support our channel, we would really appreciate it. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is do a giveaway of one of these, okay? And what you'll do is, if you do win, I'll put my email address up there. You'll email me your contact information and mailing address, and we'll ship it off to you. You'll have it here shortly. So anyway, I see people are getting in here. People like it. Mug me, mug me.
Mug
please,
me.
please, me, mug me. Anyway, get in there, everybody, and we'll ask Bitty if you'll do like a 5, from 5 down to 1, and then I'll just click on somebody, and we'll see who wins. Okay.
Okay. You want me to go ahead? So
yeah, go right
5,
ahead.
4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Blow Drill wins it. Pick it. Xenu Light. Congratulations. I forgot to mention Blow Drill. I hope you're in the United States, because we can ship it in the U.S.
He
We
did.
can't ship it in
I know him.
You know who this
I know
is?
him. Yes, I do. Yes.
Good.
That's
Okay.
fantastic.
And I just randomly clicked, so there was no, if I don't know who this is, but Janis does. But anyway, Blow Drill, congratulations. You've now won a coffee mug, okay, right here. It's you can either pick right, it says right Mark, or correct right Janis, or correct Mark on the other side. You can let me know in the email which one you want, okay? And let me show you the email address you need to send it to is this one right here. This is my email address, messengerondutymf@gmail.com. That's messengerondutymf@gmail.com. Send me your name, your mailing address, and your email address, and basically I'll go ahead and get it shipped off to you through our merchandise store. And we want to say congratulations to Blow Drill. That was fun.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go and do some question and answers here. Also, we want to do one other thing, Janice. Don't you want to mention something too?
Well, I wanted to bring up that Sterling had done an interview of his mother a few days ago, and he did a great job.
Absolutely.
A lot of real interesting questions, and it was just fascinating. I mean, I know Bitty, but I sat there and I listened to the whole thing because Sterling was doing a great job with it.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So if you're interested in what Bitty has to say, definitely go over to Sterling's channel and listen to him having a serious conversation with his mom and learning things he had no idea that she had done.
Yeah.
Mark, do you by chance have his information so they can go
No,
there?
what I'm going to do is I'll put it in the description of the video. I'll put a link to that video, but you can go to Sterling Tompkins' channel. I can't remember. It's called Living Something in Scientology. Anyway, I'll put the link in there. If Sterling, if you're in the chat, put it up there in the chat for people to see as well. And, you can watch it. Like I said, I watched it too. And it's Sterling asking Bitty about her family, right? Your family.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the name of his thing, by the way. It's called Leaving Scientology, Loving Life. And
okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Mom knows.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and go to the questions here, and we'll start with the first one. We've got Argo Serlin, the back seat. He's a member of our channel. If you want to become a member, click on the join tab, and you can join and become a member and get various perks with our channel. But anyway, question, Janis, would LRH have concerns of civil authorities reaching him during any tours given on the ship at ports? In other words, when they had public come on the ship.
No. He didn't have any concern of that. He would sit in his research room which was his office at the top of the ship on the promenade deck. And the tours would all go past his office, and people would be looking in the window at him while he's at his desk writing, or while a messenger is reporting back on a message. These people would be going back and forth and just looking in there, and he had no concern about it.
Okay, great. Thanks for that question. Next, we've got a comment from Rebecca Lowe. I'm so happy to be part of the live stream. Congratulations, Mark, on your anniversary. Thank you, Rebecca. I love this channel. I so appreciate Mark and Janis sharing their lives with us. Love from Vermont. Okay, well, thanks so much, Rebecca. We appreciate you watching. We've got a question here from Maria Diller. Question, did you experience prejudices from other vessels at sea like you did at ports? Janis and Bitty?
I remember one time, just that one ship I was talking about did not like us. You know what I mean? This was the one I was talking about that was a Dutch ship or something like that. It was in Portugal, and was it in Portugal? But anyway, I don't think they liked us so much. They didn't think we were real.
How about you, Janis?
The same as Bitty on that one. Most of the ships we did not have trouble with. I mean, a lot of them were fascinated that there were women on board this ship.
Yeah.
That was a big item, that women lived on the ship. It wasn't just
U.S. Navy soldiers having a potato fight with Navy soldiers, right, Janis? You young girls?
Yes. Well, we got along extremely well with the Navy, no matter what country it was. Those young guys just loved seeing the young girls and harassing us. But we would even go over to the U.S. Navy's in town. We would go over and we would get a tour of the Navy ship. We'd hang out talking to the guys. We'd sit on the dock. Yeah, we'd have potato fights and nut and bolt fights with them. We were great public relations.
Thanks, Maria, for that question. We've got a super chat here from Jacob Harke. Hey, thank you very much. It's very generous, Jacob. Hi, Bitty. What was your job when the Apollo first came to Clearwater?
I wasn't on the Apollo when it first came to Clearwater. I mean, it didn't. You mean the staff? I would assume, because the Apollo
probably means when you first came to Clearwater on land.
And I was an external HCO aide.
Mm-hmm.
I was, so that's what it was. My job was when I first got there, when I first came back from Relay Office, New York, and I was there.
You were on that post for years.
Oh yeah, for a long time.
Yeah, a very long time.
Yeah. And then I went into the CMO in Clearwater.
Right, with me. Yeah.
Yeah. And
before I went over the rainbow.
Right, exactly. And so so that was when I first got off. Yeah, when I first came there.
Okay. Somebody asked in the comments the other day on, I wonder, why did you guys call it Over the Rainbow? And my explanation is like somewhere over the rainbow, which is like the Judy Garland song from Wizard of Oz. But also on the other end of a rainbow, it's believed to be pots of gold. In Irish, I think, I don't know, sure. So it's like, because you didn't know where you were going and it was such a mystery, we just called it Over the Rainbow, right?
Yeah,
That's what I remember. That's what I think the expression means, is over when
Yeah.
hey, I'm going over the rainbow. I'm going far away. You don't know where I'm
You won't know where I'm going.
landing, and
Yeah.
you don't know what's at the other end.
You're right. Exactly.
Right.
A pot of gold?
No.
No.
Okay, thanks, Jacob. We've got another super chat here. Sam Slade, thank you so much. Mark, would you consider Vicky Asneran the biggest historical rival to Miscavige in terms of church control? Does anyone know where she is now? I don't. I mean, she worked for Pat and Annie. That's who she worked for when she got removed by Miscavige, when he got rid of Pat and Annie Broker. Okay, so, Pat and Annie, or Annie, we've already done a video on Pat and Annie. Go ahead, Janis. What were you going to say?
Let me correct that. She worked for Annie. She did not work for Pat.
Right.
Because
But I mean, she was loyal to them both. Yeah.
Yes, she was very loyal to Annie.
Yeah. And
in my opinion,
go ahead, Bitty.
Sorry, my opinion on answer to that question, I don't think Vicky Asneran would have been the biggest rival to Miscavige. I think it actually would have been Terry.
Yeah.
Yeah. My sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was one of the first to be gotten rid of, when they got rid of her, But anyway, Vicky she got paid off. She, her and her husband, Rick, they sued Scientology, and then eventually they settled with them. And last I heard, they're down in Central America running a charter fishing business. Right, Janis? Go ahead.
Yes, they have a charter fishing business out of Playa del Carmen. And it goes across to Cozumel, back and forth. And I actually went down to Playa, and I was looking at a flyer, and I was like, Vicky and Captain Rick? And I called, but she never called me back to book a tour.
I personally want to comment that people have varying opinions of Vicky, which I know Janis has a different one than me, but I worked for her several times and I always got along with her. She looked out for me and she defended me, and I was always appreciative of that fact. And, things happened in the Sea Org, and Janis didn't get along with her, but I did. I always got along with Vicky. Anyway, go ahead, Janis.
There were times I did get along with her when I was her boss, but when she had me declared and offloaded, and I was fighting that, and that's a whole nother story, that's when I didn't get along with her.
Right. Okay, thanks for that question, Sam. We'll go to another one. He's got another super chat here. Janis, did you meet Captain Bill? What did you think of him?
Yes, I knew Captain Bill very well. I ran hundreds of messages to Captain Bill. Captain Bill was a nice guy. He had some quirkiness about him. But, and there's a couple of stories I tell in my book where he was seen FBI behind every post in LA. And, he was on a roll. Anyway, he got pulled to the ship because he was seeing a little too much. I think it was more mental than anything else. So he got pulled to the ship, and Captain Bill did not operate well under anyone but Hubbard. Hubbard seemed to be the one that could kind of rein him in. And so he was made the navigator, and then he'd end up back on as captain. And he had his moments. I remember one story when Hubbard comes out of his office, and the aides used to stand around the prom deck rail and talk to the Commodore, before he went to bed or when he was going to go downstairs or something. I remember Joan Robertson. She was the Commodore's staff aide number 5 for qualifications. And she comes walking by and she's wearing sunglasses. And the Commodore looks at her and he's like, why is she wearing sunglasses inside? And he leans over and lifts up the sunglasses and sees she has a black eye. And he's like, how'd you get the black eye? And she finally admitted, after he pulled it out of her, that Captain Bill and her got in a fight. So I had to run off and go find Captain Bill. The Commodore went up to Captain Bill and Joan's cabin with Joan, and I got Captain Bill up there, and he sat down with them for hours and did a marriage counseling on them to handle whatever had happened. But yeah, so that's a story on Captain Bill.
How about you, Bitty? Go ahead.
So we have two totally different views of this. So, and mine is not more detailed, and you are very gracious, I think, Janis. I thought he was crazy, and I thought James Byrne was crazy too. Just to be, I thought he was like a lunatic. You know what I mean? And I sort of steered clear of him most of that time. But you know what I mean? But that doesn't mean, that I think the information that she's giving is very exact. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's very true. And I don't know anything. And I say all that, and I don't know his backstory, and I don't know anything, it could have been, it was like he had terrible things happening to him, so I didn't know. But that's what I thought as a young kid.
Yeah.
Captain Bill actually was a trained architect, and he did the architect work for the castle at St. Hill.
Oh,
That's
really?
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And because I remember I did a whole message run to him about the castle at St. Hill, and I was like, why would Captain Bill know about this? And that's when he told me he was an architect, and he was the one that did all the planning for it.
Right. Well, just so you know, true story. So Sarah went and finished the castle because the castle was not done.
Yeah, because it was
There
never
was only
finished.
a certain portion of it that was done.
Right.
And they redesigned and redid the entire thing. I don't know why, but at that time it had to be. But she then went out there and did the whole thing. Anyway, just
Bitty, you reminded me. Yeah, that castle was always under construction because they didn't have enough money. They would just do it in little sections.
Yeah, but further on Captain Bill, after he left Scientology, he set up Sector 9, I believe it was called, and he tells the people that were following him, because he set up Ronzorg. And apparently they have OT levels that Captain Bill got telepathy from Hubbard, telepathically. He got it from Hubbard, and he wrote up all these OT levels. And when I was in Moscow in 2019, I went up there to do a slideshow on my book, and someone came up to me. And there was two questions that stick in my mind. One was they were asking me, who was the stronger or the better of the people, Captain Bill or Ron? And I'm like, well, Captain Bill always listened to what Ron had to say. Mm-hmm. There was no question in it. And then the other question was, and what OT level are you on Captain Bill's bridge? And I'm like, I haven't. How many OT levels are there? There's 48 levels. Apparently. So
okay, that's Captain Bill there. Thank you for that question, Sam. All right, we got a question from Sonia Kanzler. Question: do you send merchandise to Germany? Absolutely. Just go on our merch store and you just click on whatever item it is, and then when you put in your shipping address, Fourth Wall, which runs our merchandise site, it'll let you know how much the shipping is for that. So just want to let you know that. We've got another super chat here from Cherry Cupcake. Can Bitty tell us about the asbestos problems that were found on the ship? Lawrence Woodcraft talked about it on his interview with Stacy Brooks.
Yeah, I don't know who Stacy Brooks is, and
Stacy Kellerhouse, Stacy Young, Stacy Young.
Oh, yeah, Von Young's wife.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what all he said about it, so I don't know. Is a bit of what I'm saying. I do know there was asbestos on the ship, and had to be removed by people who came in separately, dressed a certain way, and all that, and follow all the rules of Curacao dry docking in order to before we would even go near it. So that's what I know of it, and that's all I know.
Yeah, it's very dangerous. My father died from asbestos. Mesothelioma comes from that. And my dad worked, he was in the Navy in the 1950s. And when he was in college, he worked 2 summers at an asbestos plant. So he died from that, so it's very dangerous.
Exactly. And you wear suits and all that stuff. It's like lead poisoning, or worse. You have to be very careful on how you take it apart, so it does not become airborne.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go to the next question here. Sorry about that. Matt Elliott has a question. Were either of you on the ship with Mike Rinder when he got stranded in Spain? Can't remember from his book when they were throwing stuff at the ship in the harbor.
Yeah, I wasn't.
You were
Janis
there?
was.
I wasn't there
Yeah.
for the rock festival.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
That's what
I
was.
was. Yeah. I've actually asked Mike if he wants to come and be interviewed with me so we can talk about the Madeira, which is part of Portugal, not Spain. But if he wants to do that with me, because he was on the land base there in Madeira, and I was actually in the town on Liberty when that happened. And I want to try and find someone else that was actually on the ship, because I wrote about it in my books, and I have the story of people on the ship, but I was ashore at the time. And anyway, we'll see what I can put together to do a whole event on this.
And
Yeah,
isn't
that'll be great.
Madeira an island off
Yes.
Portugal? Okay, got it. And it's
Yeah,
known for its flowers or something like that now. Or-
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, but yes, it was a stop point or a hideaway for Nazis
Yeah.
back in the 50s. They went there and then over to Brazil to avoid prosecution. But yeah, it's an island in the Atlantic, and it's
Okay.
closer to Africa than it is to Portugal.
Okay, Matt, thanks very much for that question. Goldie, apparently someone hasn't rock slammed the like buttons. So if you hit the like buttons, if you like this video and like this show, and also subscribe to our channel, we really appreciate it as well if you haven't subscribed already. Thanks, Goldie. We appreciate you reminding people of that. Blow Drill, this was the winner of our coffee cup. Question, did you ever work with Sita Rawlings? She was Ship Project First Floor WB in Clearwater.
It sounds so familiar, and I'm so sorry because I don't remember names and all that type of stuff. But man, it sounds familiar.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much for that question. Truth Master, were the Miscaviges thrown out of the St. Hill, England after David punched his 9-year-old female PC? Who wants to touch
I have
that
no
one?
information on
No
that. I have
information.
no information. I
I
don't
think
even
it's
know
in
that.
Ron Senior's book. I think it's in Ron Senior's book, but I don't think it was a
Okay.
9-year-old.
You would
female.
know.
Yeah, I don't even know that happened, except for I keep hearing it from different people, and the story changes. So
Yeah.
I'm not touching that.
Okay. Thanks very much. Next question, Sweet Liberty. Question, did you ever hit really rough seas? What did you do?
Well, that was the one I was telling you about. Well, for me, of being tied down or tied to the railing and stuff like that, and it was really rough seas and all that. I mean, I don't even know why we were kept up there for lookout, other than to say which direction the wind was in and to make sure we weren't, because you couldn't see anything and you couldn't, it was like the wind was so strong, and the wind and the rain and all that. So,
Well, I remember having to run down to the engine room, and so I ran forward on the prom deck and down through the engineer's quarters to go down into the engine room. And when I'm coming back, I went to open the door, and the wave had actually come and went over the top of the ship. So it was crashing on the folks on the funnel, and the water was swirling on the prom deck in front of the door as I went to open it. It was
like I said, I'm
scary.
surprised we lived.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Okay, great. Thanks for that question. Nerdman Odkin, sorry. Question, did you work with Lori Webster? She was fundraising, I see, at Flag for the Freewinds.
I knew of her. That's
Okay.
I definitely knew of her. So was Charmaine and these various other people that were associated with it. She was one of them, I think.
Wasn't Kenny Lipton involved with that too?
Yes.
Kenny Lipton?
Yes, Kenny was. Yeah. I knew Laurie. I worked with her when I was on the mission to the Freewinds. She was one of the executives of the Flagship Service under Milt Wolf.
You're correct.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And Blow Drill is back again. Question, did you ever have anything to do with the Diana? I think they mean the Enchanter Diana. Around that time, it was dry docked just north of the Flag Land Base.
I didn't.
Right. Wasn't the
No.
Enchanter renamed the Diana?
Yes.
Yeah. I wasn't around for that either.
Well,
But
the Diana had been sold, and then I heard that they bought it back.
Yeah, they bought it back. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Dave Engelhart used to take care of it a little bit. That's what I seem to remember.
Well, Dave had his little ship, the Laissez-Faire.
Laissez-faire.
Right, and
yeah.
he took care of this one because they were both small, very small.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. Here's the next one here. Jazzy Jackie question. How did people react after they did the OT8 course? Should get for 20%? I heard it was BS. Click on the source of the comment. How did you see how they were responding to it? I don't understand the question. How did people react after they did the OT8 course? I guess that's what the question is.
the only thing I remember on that is I remember my mother-in-law at that time, Loretta, had done it, and she was like, "That's it." It's like, and I remember people being kind of baffled and looking like they didn't understand it, or it was so small. Like, they must have questioned why we did this whole ship operation for that.
No, you're right. And I remember that was a concern.
Yeah.
When I worked with Miscavige and Mark Yeager, it was a concern like, how are we going to keep people on the ship when this course is so short? I mean, that's when they came up with, we'll do these OT lecture courses. Remember that?
Yeah.
And so that would give them something else to do.
Right. And so we had a separate training area we had to set up in order to do that. Yeah. And they had all those courses. I forget even the names of them, but yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much. Next question is from Carol Pearson. Nuts and bolts fights, Janis? Ouch.
Yeah.
Well, I must say the U.S. Navy started it. We were aft on the poop deck of the Apollo, and these little things kept coming up from the ship behind us, and it was the Navy ship, and they were throwing nuts and bolts at us. So we went down to the engine room, and we got a can of their nuts and bolts, old rusty ones they didn't need anymore. And Brian Charlton had given them to us, and we go up there and we're throwing these back at them. So yes, nuts and bolts. And then we went to the dock, and that's when we were walking along the dock on the seawall, and they started throwing potatoes at us. So we'd throw the potatoes back, and we got into this whole potato fight. And their admiral comes back to their ship, and they're like, stop. So we stop, and the admiral goes and gets on board and goes down below deck, and the potato fight starts up again. And then Captain Bill goes walking by, and we're now saying, stop. They kept throwing those potatoes at us. We got called back, and we got in trouble. But I mentioned to Hubbard later on that we were restricted to the ship for having a potato fight with the U.S. Navy. And that's when he was like, no one restricts my messages to the ship. And he said we were better public relations than the port captain's office.
That's a funny story. Okay, next question. Thanks, Carol. Yuwu, question. Are you familiar with Mark Stevens' parents? Kellycopter has posted an insightful video with him.
Yes.
I don't know.
Go ahead. Okay. There's in Scientology from Australia, from New Zealand, is a family, Stevens family. Robert Stevens was the oldest son of Steve Stevens. And Steve Stevens Sr. also had a daughter, Sandy Stevens Wilhair. So Mark Stevens' aunt is Sandy Wilhair. Yeah.
Well, and Phil Stevens too, right? Isn't Phil Stevens?
Yeah. But here's the interesting part. Phil was in hospital having twins, Steve and Chris Herring and Steve. Next to her was a woman having Sandy Stevens.
That's right.
It ends up then, so you got twins and a third child all born on the same day. And it ends up with Steve Stevens, the father of Sandy, marrying Phil Stevens, the mother of Steve and Chris. So they end up basically with triplets. And the young boy twin is named Steve. So his stepdad is Steve. So he becomes Steve Stevens Jr. and you got Steve Stevens Sr. So that's the Stevens family. Robert is the older brother of the three of Sandy, Chris, and Steve. And
just to explain, they're all female. Phil is Phyllis, so that's a female. Chris is a female, right? Right, Janis?
Yes, Chris
Right,
Herring.
so-
She married Norman Herring.
So
from
yeah,
South
it gets
Africa.
confusing on the genders of the names.
Yeah, but Sandy Wilhel's older brother, Robert, married Coletta Stevens. Coletta Kampleman, Kenny Kampleman's older sister. Anyway, they went to Denmark when she got pregnant, and they had Mark Stevens. And that's who Kelly Copter interviewed.
Okay, and I just want to tell everybody, Janis moonlights at Ancestry.com. So if you really want to know why she knows all this stuff, is she works at Ancestry.com.
Yeah, they should be paying me big money.
I don't know how you keep all this straight.
Now, somebody actually wanted to know how the Miscavige family tree worked. Do you want me to do that one?
No, not now. Thanks for that question, we got a question here from Tammy Sinovec. Do you have any stories about Dusty Rhodes or Art Webb? Were they both in the engine room, or what? Go ahead.
They were both on the Apollo. I know that,
Yeah.
and they were both very involved in it and stuff. So you can't have been on the Apollo and not have a story that involves those two.
Mhm.
You know,
Art Webb was the chief engineer at one point of the
Right.
Apollo, of the Royal
Right.
Scotsman. And later on, he got out and trained as an auditor and became an auditor. And I believe he's still auditing. And same as Dusty. Dusty used to be the comm runner between the Royal Scotsman and the Avon River when I arrived in Valencia. And it was Dusty that my dad gave a report to, addressed to my mother, who was over on the Avon. And Mom worked for Commodore at the time as his steward. So Mom gets it, and it's actually addressed to Hubbard from my dad. And it was a report on all these outnesses that he was noticing over on the Scotsman. And my mom gives that to Hubbard, and the next thing you know, a mission comes over, and that's the start of the liability cruise, because other things all happened. But my dad got a report through Dusty to my mom, to the Commodore. So that was my introduction to Dusty. And Dusty actually became a good friend. And when we moved ashore to Tangier in 1972, messengers were like, we need to get motorbikes. So Dusty actually loaned me his motorbike. While the ship sailed over to Lisbon, he left me with his motorbike in Tangier for 3 months. And I took good care of it. When we went back, I took it on a ferry with us and returned it to him. But Dusty was as a kid, I was 16 at that time. He was there for me as a friend. You know, a very good guy.
right. And then Ty Webb, or Art Webb, had a child, and he was called Ty Webb, who was later then in the CMO as well. And Art Webb was a big auditor, like you mentioned, in the FSO for a long time. You know, so anyway.
Okay. Thanks, Tammy, for that question. We've got another super chat here from Anon A. Thanks very much, Anon A. Did you guys go through any depression when you realized that full OT wasn't actually something you could get from Scientology? And if so, how did you cope with that?
Well, I can go first. I never thought it was. I didn't like I said, mentioned in my earlier thing, I didn't believe that that the listed EP was attainable. I'd seen too many people who had not. So that's.
I was the same thing. It wasn't my goal to become a super being. Do you know what I mean? It was really to be able to live a happy life and not have problems and things like that. I wasn't trying to, move things with my mind or anything like that. So it really, I wasn't depressed at all. How about you, Janis?
Yeah, I never had big expectations, so it was never a disappointment or something to get depressed about. I mean,
but it's interesting why, to his question, why would so many people know or think that what was written on a grade chart and issued was full of shit? Right. My French.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's interesting that we all knew that. We all knew that it wasn't accurate, but we still, and I don't know the answer. I never was depressed about it, but I don't know why go along with that. Why even, why not, and I figured, oh, well, and I guess because you figured, oh, it must be true for other people. You know what I mean? So that's the only thing.
Well, I know that if I told an ashtray to stand up in that chair and I put my hand out, I could make it stand up in the chair.
Okay, we've got a few more questions left here, and then we're going to end this off. Okay, so I got this one's a quick one. I don't know the answer to this. Do you or Janis or Bitty? Hans Christian Schwartz says, "Why did Flag have the telex designation MR?" Hope you
I
remember.
thought it meant Mediterranean Relay, but I could be wrong.
I think you're right on that, because I was trying to remember what it was, and that's the closest I could come to.
Yeah. So
Because
Mediterranean Relay,
I used to go to the relay office, which was, depending where we were at different time periods, if it was Italy or if it was Spain or Portugal, it would all go through that relay office.
Yeah, that's our best guess. But who would know that for sure would be Foster or any of the people
Yes.
connected to that.
Yeah. But I love that bye-bye. That's exactly what we used to do at the end of the telexes.
Yeah.
The telex run. Bye-bye.
I think Hans Christian may have had, maybe he was a telex operator. He knew, he had some time in there. Thanks very much for that question. We've got a question here from Loki 8833 question. How did DM come to take over for LRH? We cover that in a video. It's too long of a story to tell right now on our channel about how David Miscavige took over. We did 2 videos actually that cover the subject, and I'll add them in the description of this video so you guys can find them easily. Do you guys agree? I don't want to go into the tremendous detail. It's a long story. Okay, thanks very much for that question. Let's see, we got here. Oh, Jazzy Jackie says, question, did people share their gains after doing OT8 on the ship? Like, did they have a graduation where they would, tell their wins?
I remember they would, and the wins were so obscure. They had not like, oh, I really enjoyed doing it, or I learned a lot from that, or and you're like, what? There was no exact something you could tangible that you could grab. That's when I started realizing that there was nothing to this,
Right.
Anyway, my thoughts, nothing to it.
Okay. Thanks, Jazzy Jackie. We appreciate it. And then we've got a question here from Snake. Question, does anyone know anything about the New York City org? I'm trying to get a family member out of this cult. I don't know anything about the New York City org, but Janis, you have some good recommendations on, keeping in communication with people, right? And try and get them out.
Yeah, that's what I recommend is write that person, phone that person, email that person. Just show them that you're there. Don't even criticize their beliefs or anything.
Right.
Just show that you're caring about them. You want to make sure they're okay. You want to hear from them. Send them pictures. This day and age, that I'm sure that person has an email, and you just get in communication with them, and eventually they'll start getting in communication back with you.
Yeah, and Mike Rinder had a good. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go on. No, go on.
No, Mike Rinder last night had a good recommendation on his video with Leo Rimini where they were answering questions, and it's a good point. Don't make them feel wrong. Don't make them feel stupid or that their beliefs are crazy, because a Scientologist is just going to back off from that. So don't do that. That tactic does not work. You've got to show empathy and compassion towards them and communicate with them. Now, those are my recommendations. How about you, Bitty?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's to just be there, and I believe in the plant the seed, which is like basically just something like, hey, you can, whatever is a concern for them, that you could say, hey, you could do this here without saying anything wrong or anything bad or anything like that about what they're doing. I agree with that totally.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with maintaining a communication line, because then you have someone. And then the only other thing would be planting a seed, saying like how you're doing well, how you're doing good, how you're able to make your own decisions, how you're able to, do that type of thing is, I think, good.
Yeah, because I know when I was in there, you're working just to move forward and move this big organization and purpose. And if someone's criticizing what you're doing, you're not interested in hearing that.
Right.
And it's just like when Victorian government banned Scientology. What did these families do? They got up and moved. They left their own country because their belief was banned.
Yeah.
And they're not gonna tolerate it. So why would they? Don't want to. So be nice to them, show you care for them, don't criticize their belief, and you'll eventually get them back.
Okay. Thank you very much for that question, Snake. And then this is the last question we're going to answer. Amanda Martin, question: did Bitty ever have any altercations with David Miscavige?
Yes,
Run-ins.
many. Gosh, I don't know where to.
Should that be a future video?
Yeah, separate video. I mean, there's like many. Where
Yeah.
I would, and because I was very boisterous and loud, and so I would say when I did not have this safety valve on me, the built in, that would make me shut up. So I wish I did sometimes, and so I would have a lot of alterations with him. Yeah.
Bitty, give him one story. Give him one story, and that's the one with Nori.
Okay. All right. So one story was I was going up to the new RTC building at the base. This thing was out. I had just come from the FSO, working with Debbie Cook and these type of people, and so I was brought up there, and it was he was showing me the RTC building, and it wasn't finished at this point. It was just being built, and it had. So who was there was Lou, his whatever she is, and then Shelley, and then Nori was there. Nori was in charge of services for RTC at that place.
His name was Nori Matsumara. He was Japanese. Nori Matsumara.
Yeah, and so first off, first thing I noticed was the amount of money that went into this place was crazy. I mean, they had throughout the entire building a cherry wood wainscot. I mean, that alone was like incredibly expensive. But anyway, so he got into some. Dave got into some saying Nori, hitting on Nori as to why it wasn't done, and he was yelling at Nori, and then he started kicking Nori, and Nori fell down, and he was sort of like continuing to kick Nori. And I grabbed him by the arm, Dave, and I said, "What are you doing? You can't do this. You're crazy." And I said, "Nori, run." So I told Nori to take off and run. And at the time, he stopped for a moment and he shook his head and went, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And I'm really sorry. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry that ever happened." And and this type of thing was how he reacted to that. Kind of like. And I was like confused, like, well, why did you do that? Like, that was probably the first time I ever saw him hit anyone. You know what I mean? And I didn't see him because I left way, like I said earlier, but later than you two, but still way earlier than the hole and all that. But but that was the first time. And then he was sort of like a bad child who hit someone and then, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." And that type of reaction to it. But that was the first altercation. And I remember thinking at that time that he's lost it. He's like, and I remember Shelley and Lou just standing on the side, sort of like as if nothing had happened, and I'm like,
yeah,
why this happened?
That was my first experience when I first saw him in 1983 or 84, actually lunge across the desk of somebody in the office next to mine. That Shelley and I are standing there, and he went after Jason Bennick, who worked for me, and Jason had said something flip, I guess, and he just went nuts. Shelley and I went, Dave, stop. And we pulled him off of him. You know what I mean? Like, that's like your reaction, Bitty, is what a normal human being would do. You go like, wait a second, stop. And what's crazy to me is that all these beatings and stuff that happened years later, the other staff, like you said, they would just stand there and just watch him do it. They wouldn't stop him. And that's crazy. He's a nut anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, that was one.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Amanda. Listen, Bitty, we loved having you on here. And of course, we'd love to have you some more. Before I let everybody go here, we want to remind people, please subscribe to our channel at Mark Fisher and Janis Gillham Grady. Okay. If you have any questions that we missed, ask in the comment section on this video. We check them regularly. And when we have Bitty on again, we will ask them again. Okay. And then I also want to mention Janis's book. You can get Janis's book right here. Commoner's Messenger, Book 1, A Child Adrift in the Scientology Sea Organization, and also Book 2. And you can get them from our merchandise store autographed to you. All you have to do is click on our merch store. And also I have it down below the comment section. And you can get a personally autographed book copy sent to you from Janis. And it's well worth the read. It's got photographs, and it's goes into details about her years on the Apollo, and also book 2 up to the point where they get to Clearwater. So anyway, we just want to remind people of that. Bitty, is there anything else you would like to say?
No, that's
we've enjoyed
it.
this.
Thank you. I
How about you,
enjoyed it.
Janis?
Yeah.
It's been fun, and make sure you rock slam that like button.
Exactly. Anyway, Bitty, hold on. Okay, after I play the video, and we'll talk off air. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next
Bye.
time.